Hi, I'm Howard Linson, the host of this show, Panic with Friends, and I'm panicked about 2023.
Hey, Howard, how are you?
Hey, Neuter.
Hey there. So things
Little switcheroo.
are a little different today. I'm going to be interviewing you, and you have to follow my tone.
I'm happy to follow you. I used to follow you in college. Howard, here's the homework. Copy it, change a couple things so we don't get caught.
Yeah. Well, I never did that, of course.
Howard, here's a drink. Here's a drink. Drink it.
That was not hard to ask me about. So anyways, I'm leading this interview, and you need to just sit back. We are going to jump right into this, and today we're going to talk about Wallstrip. Wallstrip was this amazing little financial show that Howard invented and concocted and gave birth to sometime in the 2000s. So we're going to ask him about that.
I think the reason we decided this is it's like a question we just get asked all the time.
Yeah.
Because I share some of these clips, so it's something that people, it's so long ago, but yet people, when they see the clips, they ask me. So we'll walk through this. Hopefully it helps some founders, because as we enter 2023, there's a big boom happening. I know it's a bear market right now, but I feel a big boom, so I want to talk about what it felt like back then, too. Right. So go ahead.
So what was your inspiration for making the Wallstrip show, and what year did you start doing this?
So the year is probably 2005. I'm trying to think, I'm 57 today, so 17 years ago. So I was 40. So I was kind of old. And I had those 10,000 hours of being in the investment business. I wasn't very good. I was definitely disgruntled. You were probably in my hedge fund back in the day.
Oh, yeah. You weren't happy back then.
Yeah, I wasn't happy. Not a technology person, so computers didn't mean that much to me, especially if you were in my business. Everything was kind of DOS-y and Microsoft-y. But in 2002, I think it was, the iPod came out. I became this Apple fanboy, and it was slowly just moving to an Apple world, even though we were in the financial world. And by just being in the Apple store all the time and playing with iPods and just being an Apple fanboy, I became an internet person. And luckily for me, at the end of the internet bear market, it was right around 2005, 2006, and we had this explosion, a real explosion. For me, the first thing that made sense to me, because I didn't use MySpace or Facebook at the beginning, was YouTube.
Right.
And do you remember YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember kind of like it being interesting to you, though? Or do you remember like...
it was just a new thing, and it was cool. I've never really been a huge user of it ever, but, it's very useful.
So back to what was the inspiration. So I had done, as a kid, in my teens, stand-up comedy in Toronto. So I grew up in Toronto, and, the people that grew up around the iPhone era have the iPhone and all the stuff around that. When I grew up in Toronto in the 70s and early 80s, my formative teen years, Toronto was all about comedy. We had all these great comedians. We had John Candy, Eugene Levy, Mike Myers. We had, the whole Second City thing. Chicago knows Second City, but Toronto had a better Second City with these people. Joe Flaherty, Dave Thomas, and, of course... Oh, God, I'm having so many senior moments. Jim Carrey. So right. I used to go to comedy clubs in Toronto, and just, you didn't know it because you can't possibly look that far in the future, but you would watch just comic after comic, play and doing voices, and you just knew it was just in the water at that time. So the late 70s, early 80s, when I was like 15, 16, that was the thing. Sneak into a comedy club and listen to these great comics all over Toronto. And at the same time, Second City on TV was this show that was about, it was way before The Office, but it was a show about all these comedians playing characters, the Second City, about a TV station. So they were just spoofing this TV station, not in the same camera way, obviously, because it was like, I don't know, 40-something years ago, but it was just hysterical because it was just like your version of what a TV station, a Canadian local TV station was run by. And it was all these classic characters and talk shows. If you grew up at that era and you had any bit of sense of humor, you were lucky because you just thought comedy was the thing. That was like the internet.
Right.
And so I did stand-up comedy. It was terrible. So, and you know, as a Jewish kid, you can't tell your parents you're going to be a stand-up comedian in Toronto. So you go to school. I got my way through school, floundered around, became an entrepreneur. And, you know, when I started my hedge fund 25 years later, it really wasn't like a good decision. But I was very independent and entrepreneurial. And by 2005, I was so beat up by the bear market and just not having really any scale at what I was doing.
Well, I do remember that. You're not having fun at all, and you wanted something else, and I think maybe that was the reason why you started thinking in these terms. Is that right?
Yeah, it was that and the tools that I was using to do my hedge fund. I couldn't either afford them, so I was stuck using Yahoo Finance and Street.com, which weren't bad. It's just like you weren't in the game. And, you know, I couldn't afford a Bloomberg. Just,
right.
You know, it was kind of a lone wolf and didn't have real mentorship. And it just wasn't making me happy, right? Like just, you know, trying to measure myself against the market. So like you said, like it was just like I was doomed. I was just in my own spiral of, you know, wrong career, wasted skill set, and just unhappy. And so the Apple Store was like my thing. It was just like, oh, you know, the iPod was just...
You were in heaven there.
I was in heaven because I wasn't a geek. And the way they did I don't know. It was just the iPod was the first thing, and a music guy is the first thing that just made sense to me from a technology standpoint.
And I think these were tools that you could relate to and you can figure out how to use, saying, you know, you weren't that technical.
Yeah. And so I don't even know what the browser was that I used in 2005, 2006.
Probably Internet Explorer.
No, it definitely wasn't. It was probably Safari. I don't know what.
Really?
Yeah, because I was using a Mac, so whatever Mac was offering at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm using Safari. Anyways, Web 2 starts, and I discover TechCrunch. I'm trying to think of some of the other big media brands at the time. So I just start reading about Web 2, and into my office comes Brett Darrow, Golf Now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so his father, what's his name? His father had come to pitch me some religious pyramid internet scheme. I don't know why it came into my office to be pitched at. I forget his name. Anyways, he comes in to pitch me. I go, look, dude, I don't know much about internet, and this feels like not my thing. And he says, I don't know, he sees a golf picture on the wall or something. He goes, you know, my son has a golf company, Golf Now.
Oh, really?
Or Golf 602, and I say, I'd like to meet your son. And, you know, because at this time, I didn't want to do my regular job. And so, you know, Brett Darrow comes to pitch me Golf 602, and I'm, you know, I show it to Tom, I show it to a bunch of my friends. I said, this is it. This is, I don't know anything about the internet, but I go, wow.
This
thing is a license to print money. And I probably, you know, I remember going home to see Ellen and I said, let's sell the house. I'm going to put, you know, $500,000 into this thing. And we downsized. We probably put too much money into Golf Now. But I think it was that baby step to Wallstrip. It was like, I didn't have to run the company. It would have been too big a step. Meaning, I probably should have asked to be more involved, but I was like, no, I got my hedge fund. This will just be an investment. But what happened for me, position sizing wise, it was too big.
Right.
Like, you know, too much stress to, you know, sell your house, downsize, put that much money into like your first big startup.
That's gutsy.
And not be running it, even though we love Brett and his partner Frank, you know, when I just was not in a position to not be a meddler. And so, you know, as Golf Now, which was super successful, we changed the name, blah, blah, blah. As it became more successful, I'm like, guys, why aren't we doing like a video show and like why aren't we integrating more than you figured out how to do tea times? Why don't we turn this into a media company? And Brett, to his credit, was like, no, you know, we do one thing, let's just focus. We've got, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars in tea times ahead of us. Like, leave us alone. So out of spite, my first spite company was like, wow, I'm going to show them. Right? I'm going to create a show about golf. It's going to become really popular. And they'll, you know, blah, blah, blah. So the more work I did, the more I was like, I don't really didn't have a passion for making that type of show. And during this time, YouTube becomes a thing.
Right.
And it wasn't just YouTube, it was Crackle. There was like 100 video, but YouTube was the one that everybody locked onto in 2006. And, you know, at the time I had just started blogging, had met Fred Wilson, who had started TheStreet.com. And then one night I had this epiphany that I'm going to create, you know, CNBC on YouTube. You know, the Second City version of it, like this really slapstick, like all the complaints that I had about CNBC. This is a fantasy, of course, because it was just me in a room. But I'm going to make a show that runs 24/7 on YouTube that is inspired by what Second City did in the day. And it's just going to be these people that run a financial news network and just are terrible at their job. So I'm sure you got pitched. Did you invest?
I did.
Okay. So all my friends got pitched, and lucky for me, everybody invested. But I, you know, going down the Web 2 rabbit hole at that time, because, you know, opening up TechCrunch was like opening up Twitter. Okay. So I know it's hard for people to understand this, but that's how early the web was. So TechCrunch was kind of the place you went to see who was launching cool stuff. Right.
Right.
And so that was my drug. I would go there and just be inspired by all these people creating companies. So now it's in my head, and I'm writing up this idea, and I was reading Fred Wilson's blog at the time, and I remember just the way I am even today. Like, there was no reason to cold email Fred a pitch. Can you imagine pitching Fred? Well, just like people pitching me just because they get inspired of hearing one thing.
Yeah.
What are the odds that I'm going to return that email and actually think it's a good idea? So 0% chance. I'm just like, I think I have the best idea. I honestly don't even know at the time that Fred's into fintech. I was just reading his blog. Meaning I was just like, wow, this guy's super smart. I sent him this one-pager, you know, probably spelling errors if you know me. And it was just I'm really excited about this idea. What do you think? And he was interested.
Right.
Yeah. And he'd kind of known me through commenting on his blog. And we got on a call, and he said he really likes the idea and he would invest. And he said he would invest, I don't know, $50K. He wasn't going to do it through his fund. It was just like an art kind of project.
Can you tell us about how he and his wife came out here and met you and Ellen, and his wife thought it was
So
nuts.
these are all random things.
Right.
In 2005, when I became a fanboy of his from his blog and just disgruntled at my own job, I would just hang out on his blog in his comment section and say weird things, and it just became a cast of characters on his blog, much like Twitter is today. He had thousands of people that were reading his blog and then commenting on it.
But he was probably like the rest of us who knew you, got to know you, that we realized there was something there with this guy from Toronto, that he had weird ideas and he was all over the place, but there was a theme. He was on to good ideas all the time. And the first one was Golf Now, and then Wallstrip.
Yeah. And before I started my hedge fund, it was The Grip. So we had a successful business. I had turned that into the hedge fund, which was a bad decision. And now I'm looking to get out. And I'm not a real estate person. And during this time, the real estate boom's going on, but it didn't interest me. So Web 2, I'm down the rabbit hole. He says he's coming to Phoenix, and I invite him to a Suns game. We hadn't met. And there's no Twitter. So it's just his blog and some psycho that there's no face, no name. You know, there's no way for him to know who I am.
Like
the internet was really not fully developed.
Like Fred Wilson's sign?
No, he just trusted from my comments that I wasn't a killer. But his wife, Gotham gal,
right?
And he tells me the story that she was just, you can't go out with this person. You know, you can't go. This is only 2006. Like, you can't go out with this person that you just know from the internet. Anyways, Fred went to the game. It was friendly. It was awkward, of course. Because it just didn't have that internet thread back then. It was much clunkier. But anyways, that's Fred. He kind of knew me, and then he said, yeah, I'll do it. And not only did he commit $50K, he sent me a bunch of other people that might like to invest. So he had this network that I didn't know. That's not how business got done. I thought I'd have to find 12 other Fred Wilsons. He just gave me a list. He said, I really like this idea. You know, let me take some risk, and here's some friends. So
he was the ultimate key to this.
Yeah, he was the definite mentor / what do you call it, node. You know, I had put in the work, but it's locked. Later, I found out from him that he had been the first investor in TheStreet.com and Maltech, so he knew he was kind of fascinated by the markets. So little did I know he had backed Jim Cramer. Well, again, we didn't know each other that well. He didn't need to tell me the reasons he liked the idea, but he was Jim Cramer's first backer. So he actually understood my insanity and saw that it was different than a Jim Cramer's attack. So for him, it was a no-brainer. Didn't know any of this, so that's why he introduced me to like 12 of his friends. So I'm on my Motorola StarTech at the time, or Nokia, whatever the Nokia that I was, we were all using at the time, to start beep, 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 start dialing people. And the first one is, I'm shaking. It's Brad Feld. I knew him from his blog. And he goes, yeah, I'm in for $25K. So I go down this list. Roger Ehrenberg, who I kind of knew, he invests. Andy, now people are going to be pissed. But anyways, a good group of people.
Right.
And the last person I called is the guy Mark Pincus, who later went on to found Zynga. I dialed Mark. Mark, don't know who he is, picks up the phone and goes, hey, I said, listen, Mark, I'm doing this thing. It's Wallstrip. It's CNBC on YouTube. And he goes, this is a really dumb idea. And oh, by the way, and he goes, tell Fred not to give up my phone number anymore. So, and then hangs up on me. So I call Fred. I go, Fred, this is incredible. Like, we've got like almost all the money raised. Thank you for the intros. I overgive Fred, in my opinion. Not in my opinion. It's a tip for other people. It's like, if you don't know what you're doing and someone really offers to help, it's okay to give more than what's normal. I just overgave Fred. I was just like, wow, thank you. Anyways, that inspired him to help even more. So anyways, I'm off and running. Long story short, in the end, Mark Pincus ended up, it's a whole nother story. Mark Pincus did end up investing, but never agreed with the idea.
Right. He just trusted Brad.
No, I have so many Mark stories, but he just never liked the idea. And even when we made money, and when I told Mark that how well we did, he goes, I can't believe this is stupid. Which is just how the world still works today.
So did Fred just say, come on, put some money into this?
No, that's a whole nother story. Mark ended up wiring after he knew the company, like 3 or 4 months later. And money showed up later once he knew we were successful. I'll come back to the story. But so anyways, we start the company with $590K. It ends up becoming $600K with Mark Pincus's money. And off we go with just like a basic idea of what an internet show will be on YouTube. And there we go. So that was how, long story, the inspiration.
So where did you go from there? How did you come about the actual production?
Yeah, so back then, like, I think the valuation on Wallstrip at the time was like 300 or 400K pre-money valuation. I don't know, it gave up 40 or 50% of the company. And still running my hedge fund, but now I start writing this idea. You can't go build a 24-hour YouTube channel in one day. So the idea is to do this 1 3-minute show every day.
Oh, wow.
That's a spoof.
Did you do it every day?
It was every day.
Oh, my God.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. And again, the inspiration for the show, too, is this show called Rocket Boom. So you got to have some semblance of ideas. So Rocket Boom was one of the innovators of the time. Because at the time on YouTube, 99% of the videos were stolen or uploaded from a TV show or of a cat, like of someone filming their cat. It wasn't like content, right? It was more like no one knew what to do with their camera. Like, it was just so new. People were doing absolutely dumb things. There was no production. People were just turning their cameras on things and running it and uploading it to YouTube. But because of my position as someone who hated my job and knew Second City and hated CNBC, it all just made sense to me. I said, I just now have a platform to just create a free 24-hour channel. So we start with this 3-minute idea. I don't know anything about making a show or producing a show, so I just start searching, find production teams, interview a bunch of production teams, came upon Adam and Jeff, Adam Elin, and I hired them. I said, guys, we agreed on like 6 or 7 or 8 grand a month, which was cheap. But they were just struggling producers who wanted to do, make this one of their jobs. And I hired them. My instincts were they were very talented and understood my vision of how to create a show. That was all very trusting because I had no experience doing this. And John Labes, who you met, they hired John Labes later on. And I was so excited because I was going to be like a producer.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I don't know anything about producing, but I was just so excited. Oh, I get to interview people and pick the star of the show because I didn't want to be in the show. I was going to be more like Larry David, like the foil. So the idea of the show, Knut, was that I'm no actor. I'll write the skits and come up with all the ideas, but we need professional actors because I'm not an actor. But I would like be spoofed upon. Because I wasn't famous, so I would just be the foil if they needed a foil, like someone who just something bad would happen to, or the person they were making fun of, the extra.
Right.
An executive producer, blah, blah, blah. So that was just who I was. And we came up with a budget and we could spend maybe $3,000 a show. This back in 2006. But I'm sure that was more than 99% of people could spend to do this, right? So for its time, it was going to be high quality. And so we interviewed maybe 300 women.
Wow.
So I thought that would be the exciting part. Ooh, I get to pick the face of the show. And I was inspired by this Rocket Boom show, which I mentioned, which was also a 3-minute show about stuff on the internet with a pretty hostess in a T-shirt, like a new company, like a startup company that would just give her a T-shirt to wear, and she would just do goofy news, tech news. So that was the show that I was copying. I'm going to do the same thing for my first show, but about the markets. So I had a basic framework. Rocket Boom was very successful. I'm not saying financial, but it was kind of, for its time, viral. You know, it was kind of the 3-minute TechCrunch video show. So I'm like, okay, they have a formula. People seem to like this on the internet. Let's do a 3-minute show about my world. And off we went. So the next thing is we had to find our Rocket Boom hostess. So we're interviewing hundreds of women, and we get it down to 5 or 6. And Lindsay Campbell, she just had you know what I mean? Her face just was the face for that screen at the time. There were no mobile phones. It's just like, you know, in person, whatever. I'm just saying, when I was looking.
I agree with you.
Right? Like
she had presence.
She had just this 17-inch screen
voice,
desktop
smart,
presence. Yeah. Stanford actress, didn't really want to be an actress. She was more smart. She wanted to be on the other side of the camera. And right place, right time, you know, from a Craigslist ad, she became like the key to the show because she was a professional actress. Guys loved her. She knew nothing about, she was she's like, you know, California girl. She's like surfer girl. She could care less about the stock market.
Yeah.
Just thought the whole thing was stupid. And every guy, she just had this flirtatious, not in person, but like the screen, the way she commanded the screen at that time, we just picked the right woman.
You did.
And not only did we pick the right woman in Lindsay, you know, when you get a 10-timer, like an engineer that's just better than every other engineer, Lindsay also then took it upon herself to kind of be executive producer too and teach me and bring in all her friends who were actors and just call in favors. Because literally the only thing I knew how to do was raise the money, give them the idea, promise to give them 100 ideas that they could pick from, right? Because they knew nothing about the market. They just, they would go through my ideas for a script and go, that's funny. Didn't matter about the market or not, that's just funny, right? Like the Adobe Flasher.
I know it had entertainment value, but did it have actual like stock advice value?
Absolutely dumbest idea. Like again, it was just so much passion and so little thinking. So this goes to the point where if you think about Wallstrip and what we created, it's a really bad idea, right? But because of my place in life and the 10,000 hours of like hating CNBC, you know, knowing what products I needed and having that Second City background and yada, 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 I just was willing to do anything but my regular job. And this was the first idea that got traction, at least amongst investors. So it was not less thought, more let's just do it. So off we went, we got Lindsay, and now we have to make our first show. So that's probably still like a month. All this is crammed into like 1 or 2 months, like with the story so far. But that's where we were. And so for the first show, I chose Apple because Apple was the stock.
Oh, that's right.
Of the time, 2006.
Is that where you were outside the headquarters?
Yeah. Well, that was where I was, the store on Fifth Avenue, the main Cube one.
Yes.
So Apple was opening stores. It was like my one stock that I owned. It was just, I over-owned it, much like golf now. it was too big a position for me. So all I did was like know everything I could about Apple. And my idea was we were going to, for our first show, again, I have no audience, no nothing. It's just my own funny idea. I said, I'll just wear, my religious garb, Jewish religious garb, and I'll just go pray and leave a note like the Wailing Wall.
That's right.
On front
now
of
I remember.
the Apple
That's
store.
Awesome.
So I had 50 ideas, and they all were laughing. They were like, this is great. Even though they didn't know anything about stocks, they were like, this is funny.
Right.
And so, you only have 3 minutes. It takes all day or 2 days to make enough tape and edits. I didn't know any of this.
I know all about that.
I thought we would just do one clip, we're out. Everybody's got cat videos. So it's like, I didn't know how much work it would take. So again, if you don't know, you don't know. Once you know, you're like, I wouldn't do this again. Because to get 3 minutes took 6 people 2 days, right? And that's why content is hard. So that's why I love good content, because I know what goes into it.
Right. Now
it's also why I won't do it again. Like podcast is easy. We sit down, one take. That's why it's popular. But good stuff comes from experience and from sound and editing. So imagine all this having to go on in 2006 equipment, bandwidth, etc. Slow internet. So we're doing all this pre everything. Facebook was just probably taking off. So we get this show in the can, which ends with me, this guard, because people weren't allowed near this store, and I had to break through, and I'm not an actor, and I'm just like, no, I'm not. I had no, and it's New York.
Right.
So I've got to like wear my weird religious garb, my tallis and my kippah, and like walk through the crowd, and they're filming all this, and I'm like, I can't do this. I don't have the nerve. But in New York, this is just normal, I guess. So the whole joke is I walk up, put a Post-it note like you would in the Wailing Wall where people leave notes, and it just said, "Dear Steve, open more stores." And that's the joke. Right. I don't even know if it is a joke, but we do the show, and this is the key to anything that I didn't know, is editing. Oh, yeah. So again, I don't know this. Like, I don't know. I just takes 2 days. I'm like worn out. I've written 4 other shows because you got to keep stuff in process. And now they have to go through that stuff. That's what professionals do in that space. That's where I got lucky with Adam and Jeff and Lindsay. They edited this thing to a point where it was so well cut. Yeah. We had Rockaboom as an example. We had my irreverence and voice. We had the object being the company. Every day we'd talk about a company that I liked. And the foil would be a twist. Right. Something culturally relevant that would just be a shocker,
So, one thing is editing and telling a story. Another thing is when you edit humor. And you know all about this. When you edit humor, timing is everything, right? Picture-wise, audio-wise, everything. So I understand how much went into that because I used to do editing myself.
I wasn't part of
commercials. I know, but you saw what went into it.
Meaning I knew they kept saying you're great. And I was just like, they're blowing smoke up my ass. Because they're saying I'm great, and they said, go do it again. I go, I didn't want to do it the first time. I think the only reason it worked is because I didn't know what I knew. I didn't know it would be that hard.
Was this the moment when you realized that this was going to have success?
No,
or did that come much later?
So I remember the first show, and obviously Fred was helping promote, and the internet was very different. There was no social networks yet. Right. And there wasn't just YouTube. You had to send it to 1 million of these things. But it just from the very first show, probably because people who knew Fred were very wealthy or media people. So it wasn't that a lot of people saw it. And this was the trick. It was the right people were watching.
Exactly.
So from the very first show, very connected media people who follow Fred. Right. And this is the trick that I didn't know was a trick. And this is the trick people use today. They call it blitz. They wrap it in all kinds of different names. Blitzkrieging, they repackage this stuff, making them sound like geniuses. Growth hacking. Here was my growth hack. Lucky Fred was my investor. Right. So no one wants to admit that. He was
your
the
biggest
growth
investor. He was your first investor. He was also one of your biggest supporters of this and helped you get
And he had
people.
A network of influence.
Exactly.
So when he says he's in, other people paid attention. Hello, that's called growth hacking, but that's not something you can reproduce every day, which is obviously what social networks and everything that came after it helped. But really, what's a growth hack other than somebody who knows the right people? So there's 2 ways to be successful in content. Masses, like everybody watches it, or the right people watch it. I learned that pretty quick. We would get 4,000 or 5,000 views a show, but we were written up in the New York Times.
Exactly.
So that's when I knew.
And you had novelty.
Hey, we had nothing.
Yeah,
I didn't know what I was doing.
It was new, but you had novelty.
It was a
there wasn't 1,000 other shows doing the same thing.
Rock-a-Boom would do 500,000 views. We would do 5,000 to 10,000 views.
Oh, yeah.
So it would drive them nuts, right? Because they invented the formula that I was copying.
Right. Were they pissed off?
I think they were always. He was a very angry guy.
Mm-hmm.
Most people that carve the way don't make the money, right? Like everybody's copying everybody. And I felt it was a compliment. I wasn't hiding it.
No.
But they knew it, and we would get all the love. They had all the traffic. We got all the attention from the right people. Okay, so we were the only guys who could create. Everybody copied them for tech shows, but no one was going to create. No one in my industry was going to go. There was CNBC and nothing. So no one was making videos, let alone videos that made fun of the system. And so it was just, we were lucky. It was a good idea, but Fred made it happen. So anyways, I started getting calls the very first day from media people saying, this is genius. So of course, it was fun. That didn't mean that we had made it. It just meant that like, whoa. And that just led to, obviously, the first thing was more stress. Like, how do we top? So better be good tomorrow because...
This is great. What's going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah. So anyways, long story short, that is how it got going. And we were very lucky that the first idea, if you go watch it, you know, it's just Lindsay 100%.
Right.
But then there's this idiot going to the Wailing Wall. You know, I prayed to the Apple Store and people got the joke. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that just created a hook. And we had all this great editing and we had the great logo and the great, like, Adam and Jeff created all these loops. I mean, they were ahead of that part. I picked the right people. So again, it's the right people, Lindsay, Adam, Jeff. I was just the ringleader, but I didn't do the hard work other than writing.
So this was probably the first moment that you realized that this was going to be a success, or at least had the potential to become a success, right?
Yeah.
Did you have any haters during this, during the times? Anyone that tried to bring you back down?
Yeah, everybody. Because it wasn't that good, right? So in the end, everybody became a hater because the content just kept getting better from other people. Like, everybody's copying everybody, so they're figuring out formats. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. So the haters come from, like, every angle. And YouTube comments were never good. So, and imagine that times 100 YouTubes. So it was very hard because it was my first true creative endeavor, and it didn't bug Lindsay. They knew it was good. She's an actress. It didn't bug Jeff and Adam because I didn't read the comments. They were just happy to be working.
Right.
But all I did was read the comments, and I was just horrified what people would say about me and Lindsay, and I would be so depressed every day saying, it isn't that good. So that's what drove me, meaning 90% of the people thought it sucked. But the right 10% of people were blown away by it, and that's what was the trick.
So, you know, when people have negative things to say about it, you know they're watching it. That's part of an audience.
It wasn't even that. There wasn't. That's how YouTube was. They didn't have to. They would just troll any video and go, sucks.
Yeah, but they created publicity around it.
And not good. I don't know much about scale or media, but as a creator, it was punishing.
From what I know, it might have brought more people to it, at least to check it out.
Of course. But those people they just will continue hating. So, again, if they can watch without commenting, it's easy. But once you can read the comments. Yeah. So that's what YouTube was like at the beginning. But we had to, get through that. And I think about the 20th show, New York Times covered us, calling it the Saturday Night Live meets. It was a great free publicity.
Nice.
And they, on their own, just wrote this great piece, and that was when I knew. And that's when Mark Pincus, I think, wired money.
That's when you knew. That was the day before.
Yeah. So when I picked up the Gray Lady, I didn't even know it was called the Gray Lady. I'm not into news or whatever. So Adam and Jeff and Lindsay were like, oh, fucking my God, this is it. You're in the New York Times. You didn't pay for it. They just covered you. And I was so heavy. It was just this awful picture of me in the New York Times. I weighed like 220.
What happened then? I mean, after that article, what happened? How did that affect viewership, et cetera, et cetera?
No, it was still never popular.
Really?
Yeah, so maybe the most, if you go look at like our most popular shows, Jack in the Box or the Apple one, maybe 30,000
Jack
views.
in the Box was done here in town. I was there.
Yeah. So maybe 30,000 views 15 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing. Now, again, I don't know all the old sites that were YouTube clones that had a lot of views too. I'm just basing it on YouTube. But on YouTube, even after all this time, if I go back and look, 30,000 views. So that would be an epic failure, right? It is an epic failure.
And
right?
still, CBS bought it.
Yeah, so then I get a call from Quincy Smith, who I just chatted with. So Quincy was the CEO. So again, this is all started by Fred.
Right.
And this is, for founders, this is why I'm telling the story. For founders, there's all these buzzwords, but really it comes down to your team, and good product, right time. If we're talking about this, like framing this back, good team, got lucky, had good instincts around who the team was. 'Cause it was all Lindsay and her crew. And Adam and Jeff knew what they were doing, and they brought in John Labes and just some characters that were just so good at, like, they were so hungry to just be discovered.
A lot of those actors
they would have done anything.
Great.
And they were getting their salaries paid, right? So that was a win. And we were burning maybe 50, 60K a month. So we didn't have endless capital. We knew there was only like a few months to do something. And either I had to go raise money. Well, the idea was eventually I got to go raise money or we got to sell ads. But forgetting all that for a sec, what I would learn in hindsight, you don't know this while you're doing it, is a team. Then it's about kind of the product, which was good, and the timing, which was, yes, television networks were making fun. YouTube was getting sued, television. So the timing was fantastic because everybody was watching. All the media people are like, is this going to be real? And everybody was behind. So we were right place, right time in the sense I didn't know this at the time. Someone was just, instead of copying us, they're just going to buy our team, but you don't know this is going on. Like, how could you possibly know that media companies are saying, just bring in Lindsay, let's just make them employees of CBS. But I have no idea any of this is going on. We're just making the show, and I'm stressed out of my mind and thinking through raising more money. And CBS, Quincy Smith calls. And before that, my own type of growth hacking was, okay, what's our next big idea? So my next big idea, which was what led to CBS calling, was, the most famous person in finance at the time was Jim Cramer.
Right.
And he's the same personality he did today. He's just younger. He invented a lot of this stuff. Fred had been his investor. And the way Wall Street worked, they hoard. So Jim wasn't going to give anybody love. It's all about Jim. CNBC's all about CNBC. But they were watching us. The CNBC people were watching us. We were under their skin. And I said, why don't we spoof Jim Cramer? And everybody had spoofed Jim picking stocks. Even to this day, it's like, making fun of Jim as a stock picker. And I said, why don't we make Jim give advice about other things, right? So the hook that I had for our Jim Cramer show was to have Jim give medical advice. So Lindsay goes into her, group of friends and picks out a person that is a method actor and knows nothing about finance, looks exactly like Cramer, and enough, and then just disappears for 2 weeks and becomes Jim Cramer, right? Like disappears into his basement, studies everything about Jim Cramer.
Right, I remember.
We write this script where Jim is just fired from his job, working in Queens at like a shitty network, giving medical advice to people. A call-in show where he's like, should I get the surgery? Shouldn't I get the surgery? And that really got under, in our little world, first of all, Jim's going to watch it.
Right.
Okay. Secondly, CNBC's going to watch it. Thirdly, everybody who hates Jim Cramer is going to watch it. But we weren't making fun of him. We were making fun of the style. And we were saying, like, Jim could do anything if you applied it, right? And so that led Jim to call us through CNBC and at thestreet.com and say, we want it. And I think his idea was to buy it, shut it down, get rid of Howard Lindsay, which was fine with me. I'm like, all right.
All right, how much do you want to pay?
Yeah. So they offer, I think, $2 or $3 million for the show. I would have sold for $1. So I'm like at Costanza, I'm like, deal. And I call Fred and I go, Fred.
And Fred says, not enough.
Yeah, Fred goes, I didn't know you wanted to sell. Because I knew nothing about the business. He was like, I thought this was going to be a 10-year thing. And like 3 months into it, Cramer's trying to buy it. And Fred goes, let me make a couple calls. Mm-hmm. And then sure enough, Mike Marquez is a good friend of mine who is head of corp dev at CBS, calls me and says, we want to sit down with you. And that which led to, long story short, CBS acquiring us, a couple weeks later. And the rest is history. But and I'm still friends with Mike, very, very good friends with Mike. And Quincy, I was just talking, he was CEO of CBS Interactive at the time. And obviously I'm very good friends with Fred and Pincus and all these characters from 2006. And we could go into everything else that I've learned, but I feel like we get back to the main points, right? And, flash forward to the beginning of 2023, which I said I'm panicked about. I feel like we need that kind of passion, So 2006 was this big bang in media and distribution and social web. And then you had the iPhone, you had Amazon Cloud, and you just had this Cambrian explosion in usage of the internet, mobile phones. And as we enter 2023, I don't see, we still have all those tools and they're very popular, but now we also have all this, everybody's a Wallstrip, everybody's a Howard Lindsay, everybody's an influencer. There's Mr. Beast, right, is probably the king of this now, right? Like there's new kings, Joe, what's his name? Podcast. I'm having another Rogan. So what we did at Wallstrip is like a fly on a camel's back, It was just the passion, the team, the timing, the knowledge about what would work, just spinning the Cramer a little bit, and the media companies needed to get into that business.
Right.
As we head into 2023, and of course, getting the right mentors, Fred.
Yeah.
Crossing the threshold, which was like the New York Times moment, really pushing hard every day, not sitting back. Because you didn't have those network effects back then. The problem with media is you make one show, you got to start all over the next day. Your audience, if it's not good the next day, they may never tune in again.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So the really bad idea at the highest level. But if we were to take my first, personal successful internet startup, it's like golf, like my own that I started from scratch. The things that I learned were the things that I fixed in doing Stocktwits. Stocktwits was about not making video, which is about scale, more scale, which is about other people contribute. You know what I mean? Like flipping the whole model. And, as we enter 2023, all these things, we've learned in, media, networking, all the things that I learned here about like finding the right people, having that domain experience around an idea.
Right.
And that like something was inside of me that was so pissed off. And CNBC's not away. Jim Cramer's still on TV. Wallstrip is gone. All the things I wanted to change, those are the other thing you got to remember. All the things I wanted to change didn't change. The same people are in charge. So you have to fight through all that. And I kind of know in the end that it's very rare that you create something that lasts.
It is very rare.
So all I can do is tell these funny stories and kind of help people try and learn from them. And it was a great financial win for everybody involved because it wasn't like life-changing in the sense that you're not selling for $1 billion, but the speed of which it happened, 6 or 7 months, and we were the first show on YouTube or acquired by a major media network. It's those things that people can't take away.
No.
And that comes from just the timing of it. I was inspired, I knew what I needed to know, and I moved. And I was 40. So if that can inspire other people later in their career, now everybody has this in their pocket and can do it.
Well, everybody's got their tools at this point.
Everybody's got their tools. So hopefully this story will help clear up some people's thinking about how this all went down. It was a fun ride. It was really hard work, right? And that's why I haven't done it again, is because it's really hard work. And, take away some of these lessons. You can go to YouTube, search Wallstrip and certain tickers and just pull up there's some really funny shows. Salesforce, Jack in the Box, Adobe, some of our interviews. If you look at the Fred Wilson interview that we did in 2006, really funny. Anyways, there's some really, Chipotle's was classic, Nike. Anyways, they kind of hold up. which I'm pretty proud about. Any other thoughts, or are you ready to wrap?
Thank you to Howard for telling that story, and a lot of people have had questions about it, and this hopefully answers most of those questions.
Yes, and one day we'll tell some more stories. I want to go and do kind of like with some of the other companies that we invested in that are successful. I want to go back and tell these type of stories. There's a famous show, How I Built This, and I think they're kind of copying on that. Where there should be a Panic with Friends, where we go back to some of our best founders and do a How I Built This.
And we will do that one day.
All right. Hope you enjoyed this. It's a little different spin on Panic with Friends. It's just me and Knut telling stories. You can find Panic with Friends if you go to Apple, Google, Spotify, search my name, Howard Lindzen, or Panic with Friends, and subscribe. You will get one of these episodes every week. Thanks, Knut. And we will see you, everybody, again next week.
Howard Lindzen is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or Stocktwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.